Hey book besties, Amanda here, and welcome to my mid-year freakout book tag. So many of my favorite booktubers have already done this challenge, and I've kind of compiled a list of the most popular questions from within a lot of their different videos, and wanted to throw my suggestions into the Bookstaverse. Is that a thing? So if you're like me and enjoy statistics, we're going to start off with just a round of stats for the first half of my reading journey, and then we're going to jump into a list of my favorites, books I'm excited about reading, and then, of course, the books that I want to read before the end of 2024. So today is Saturday, July 14th, and so far this year, I have read a total of 75 books. My goal for 2024 was to read 125 books, which puts me at 60% towards my goal. In the month of May, I had my highest reading count, which was 16 books. But in March, I had 8 5-star reads, so I would consider that my best reading month. Overall, I have read from 7 genres. I've read 28 fantasy novels and 3 novellas. I've read 15 mystery books and 1 novella. I've read 10 general fiction books, 6 historical fiction books, 5 contemporary romance books, 5 nonfiction books, and 2 horror books. Of the 75 books I've read, 30 of those were 5-star reads, 20 of those were 4-star reads, 16 were 3-star reads, and then the rest were either not rated because they were nonfiction, I didn't finish the book at all, or they just missed the mark in some way. I realize I am a very generous rater when it comes to books, but hey, if I have an amazing time and I continue thinking of the book after I've read it, it deserves a 5-star in my opinion. The majority of my books are consumed via audiobook. I drive a lot for work and therefore always have an audiobook playing anytime I'm doing laundry or dishes or any kind of mundane household task. I have my headphones on and enjoying a book to kind of make my day go by faster. But I have enjoyed 9 books with my eyeballs and another 9 books on my Kindle. I've also been dabbling with immersive reading, which is a combination of listening to the audiobook whilst also reading it on the pages. So now we're going to jump into some of these questions, and if you want to participate in this mid-year book tag, consider yourself officially tagged by me. It is next to impossible to select the best book I've read so far. I've had so many favorites. Again, 35-star reads this year. It's been an incredible reading year. But I think the books that I cannot stop thinking about would be Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows. And look how stunning these special edition covers are from Etsy. I ordered these all the way from France, but they are just beautiful, and I splurged on this purchase because they're just so stunning and they're my favorite books. So absolutely loved these. These will live rent-free in my brain forever. The best sequel I have read so far is either Two Twisted Crowns by Rachel Gillig or All In by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Two Twisted Crowns is the sequel in the Shepherd King duology, and I liked it even more than the first book. We get kind of a different romance than the first, whilst still kind of following our main character, Elspeth. We get a lot of answers for the mystery that was in the first book, and I really enjoyed the romance element within this really incredible dark fantasy world. I devoured the series. All In by Jennifer Lynn Barnes is the 3rd book in the Natural series. The Natural series is a YA mystery thriller series about 5 teenagers with natural abilities to help the FBI track down serial killers. In this 3rd book, we get a really incredible mystery and start to learn a little bit more about the overarching mystery that kind of ties all the kids together. But the mystery itself is super unique, and Jennifer Lynn Barnes is just a mastermind of puzzles, so this one is fantastic. And speaking of series, the newest release that I haven't gotten to yet is The Prisoner's Throne by Holly Black. I devoured the Cruel Prince series way back in March and read all of the books except for this one. This is the very last one on my list, so I definitely want to get to this by the end of the year. Super excited about it. This one I believe came out in March. The two books that I'm most excited for in the second half of the year are Where the Library Hides by Isabel Ibanez and The Mistletoe Mystery by Nita Prose. Where the Library Hides is the second book in the duology of What the River Knows, and it follows our main character as she is on an archaeological tour of Egypt, trying to uncover a mystery that her parents were working on before their demise. It ended with such a cliffhanger, and I need to know what happens, so I can't wait for that one to come out this fall. And if you know who Molly the Maid is, she's already your best friend. I don't even need to tell you. She's a neurodivergent main character, and she solves mysteries. She works at a pretty swanky hotel, and her guests come with secrets. So there's already been 2 books in this kind of Molly the Maid world, and this will be a new kind of Christmassy novella. So I think I'll probably save that towards the end of the year because it'll fit in my holiday vibes, but I'm really, really excited to read that because Molly the Maid, I feel like she's one of my best friends. The book that was the most out of my comfort zone was The Wager. This is an actual historical retelling of an historical event, so it's nonfiction history story. I don't know how to describe it. It's totally not something that I would normally read, but the cover was stunning and it was available on Libby, so I gave it a shot. It was a very interesting story. It's about a shipwreck that happens in the 1600s. All of these people are kind of like stranded on an island and their response to that, and then later on they are rescued, but the government doesn't want to acknowledge that they went through this turmoil for whatever reason. It goes into more details, obviously, but it was interesting. I don't know that I would recommend it unless that is kind of your, if in case you like history and you like reading about history. The narration was wonderful. The writing was great, but I guess I just don't really care about the shipwreck part of it, which obviously is the whole story. But speaking of comfort zones, my biggest surprise this year was The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This is my first time reading a book by this author, and I typically don't read romance books. I'm not a huge romance fan. I feel like usually they're too fluffy and they don't have enough story or depth to them, but I was drawn in by the time travel element of this book and highly encouraged to read it from Sarah Caroli. She really, really loved it, so I decided to give it a chance, and I loved it. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was super sweet, and I really liked the romance element as well as the time travel element, and it really did talk about some deeper elements like depression and suicide and identity and things like that, so I highly recommend this book for sure. Another book that surprised me was Heartless by Marissa Meyer. This is an Alice in Wonderland retelling about the Queen of Hearts. I have never read Alice in Wonderland. I know it's a lot of people's favorite childhood books, but I've never read the actual book. I've only seen the Disney movie, and I didn't like it at all. It's very weird, and so I didn't know how I would feel about this, but I got it at a thrift store, hence all the stickiness right here. And it worked really well for a Vampire Diaries readathon prompt. So I picked it up at the end of May and loved it. I devoured this in a day. I thought it was so good. This one would also be really good if you're a parent of younger teenagers. This one's wonderful. There's mild kissing scenes, a little bit of death, but it's not graphic at all. And the narration's wonderful. All of the character voices are incredible. This would be a fun read in the car for a road trip. So, highly recommend. My new favorite author would have to be Rachel Gillig, the author of One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns. These books are incredible. I mean, I know that I like a dark mystery fantasy storyline, but the writing itself is just so magical and beautiful, and I listened to these on audio, but I want to reread them with my eyeballs and annotate them because that's how gorgeous the writing was. For underrated gems, I'm choosing A Bond of Briars by Erin Phillips. Now, this book is marketed as a Christian cozy cottagecore fantasy, and while that is accurate, I think anyone would enjoy this book who wants a good fantasy romance. It's about our main character, Katrine, who is bonded to a blood spirit, and that gives her the ability to create these little magical runes to give to people that will help them with their day-to-day life. So while she uses her magic for what she decides is good, she's actually following her mother-in-law to the land of her birth, and in that land, magic is not allowed. So she has the choice of either working her magic and keeping it secret or denouncing magic altogether. Again, this is marketed as a Christian cottagecore fantasy, and that's because it is a retelling of the story of Ruth and Boaz. But again, you don't have to even know the biblical story at all to enjoy this book. The fantasy world building itself is phenomenal. The writing is fantastic, and the romance is like, kicking your feet, giggling. It's so good. I made some annotation notes. This is definitely one of my favorite books of the whole year. So if any part of you is interested in this, please pick up A Bond of Briars by Erin Phillips. Another underrated gem is The Twilight Garden by Saranisha Adams. She's the author of The Reading List, which was quite popular a couple years ago and one of my favorite books of 2022, I believe, 2023. Was obsessed with that book, so I immediately needed this book on my shelves. Saranisha Adams is like the queen of just nostalgic writing. So in this story, you have two sets of neighbors, both past and present, and they share a yard together. And they don't know it, but this yard contains so much history in sharing a garden and this community element that brings them together. So in the future, there's these two neighbors who are very different, and this garden kind of connects them. And then you also jump back in time and see the same kind of thing playing out in the past, where the garden kind of pulls a whole community of people together. I think this book really is for everyone. Everyone can relate to this in some way. It's nostalgic, it's beautiful, it's caring, it makes you feel all the feels, and I highly recommend it. The repeat offender on my TBR is Daisy Hates. This is book 2 in the Magnolia Parks universe. I read Magnolia Parks last year and loved it. It was so interesting. Obviously, the characters are super toxic and none of these relationships are good, but the characters are really, really fun. I have been told that I would probably like Daisy Hates even better than Magnolia Parks because I'm a big Peaky Blinders fan and like The Sopranos. I love that kind of mob boss environment, and that's kind of the setting for Daisy Hates, despite all the flowers on the cover. But I definitely want to get to this before the end of the year. I think this will be a good book for August when I participate in the Battle-a-thon, since my team, Team Thorns, has to read books with kind of naturey words in the title. So Daisy fits that prompt. My biggest disappointment this year is probably my own fault, and that is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. Leigh Bardugo is one of my favorite authors. I absolutely love Ninth House and Hellbent, Six of Crows. They're some of my favorite books of all time. So I was super excited for this adult standalone novel. I mean, look at this stunning cover. It is everything that I love. It's like historical Spanish vibes. It's the dark background, the gold lettering. I was so excited to read this book that I bought this special edition because that's how excited I was, and I don't know, it missed the mark. It was fine. It's in no way a bad book at all. I gave it a 3-star. I don't know if it's because I was participating in a readathon and I was a little bit burnt out by reading, or if it was the audiobook experience. I'm not sure, but it didn't connect with me. So I'm planning on rereading these with my eyeballs in a future year once I've kind of forgotten enough about the story to revisit it, because again, everything about it screams like this isn't going to be Amanda's favorite book, and for whatever reason it just, I don't know, it was just okay. Let's talk fictional crushes. So we've got Miles from Funny Story. I just love Emily Henry's writing, and I fall in love with all of the boys. Miles has got to be my favorite boy she's ever written in her books, and I really loved him. I thought he was funny. I thought he was so sweet for taking her on, all of these adventures, trying to get her to stay in town, and I loved them. They were so sweet. But I think my favorite fictional crush this year so far has to be Ephraim from The Frozen River. This is our main character's husband, and he is like husband goals. He's just so supportive. He's very encouraging. He loves her even though these really dark, tragic things keep happening to her. And he's just like the best support system. So when it comes to fictional crushes, Ephraim, he's goals. The book that made me cry, not only cry, but sob multiple times, is The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry. Now, I'm not usually an emotional reader, but this book has it all. It follows our main character, A.J., right after the loss of his wife, and different people come into his life and kind of give him a new outlook on moving forward. It is beautiful. It follows his life in the following decades, and just the characters that come into his life and change him for the better are phenomenal, and I sobbed. Like, I love this book. The film adaptation is just as wonderful, but as I was watching that, I'm like hardcore sobbing, and my husband's like so concerned, and he's like, you need to stop reading books if they're gonna make you this upset. So despite all the tears, this one is a 6-star read. It is so good. It's so thin. Like, everybody just read it. I don't care. Just go and read it. Go to a thrift store. It's probably $1. I see these all the time. It is one of the best books I've read in my whole life. The series that made me the most happy is Powerless. Oh my gosh, you guys, like, what is this book? This is the definition of a popcorn read. Like, you can't put it down. You immediately get pulled into the story. The plot is exciting. The characters are so much fun, and the banter. Like, I'm eating this banter up. I'm smiling, I'm giggling, I'm kicking my feet. This series, you guys, read it. It's so good. So in this book, our main character, Pei, is selected to compete in this kind of set of trials. Think Hunger Games, something like that. But the problem is Pei has 0 powers in a world where everyone is expected to have extraordinary powers. So she's kind of up. She's our underdog character, and, she's thrown in the ring with a bunch of people who have way more power than her, and she has to use strategy and wit to get out of that situation. Highly recommend. The most beautiful books I've bought this year are not the books themselves, but the dust jackets for Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows. I'll give you another close-up. Divine Rivals here by Rebecca Ross. We have Iris here at her typewriter, and Roman at the back writing a letter. But like the gold foiling and the stars is just absolutely stunning. And then on Ruthless Vows, you have them here in the garden, if you know, you know, and all these little leaves. And then on the back, you just have the field, which a lot of this book takes place in fields and war zones and things like that. But I'm obsessed. Like, I will forever cherish these books. They're just 10 out of 10. Like, these ones, amazing. One of the series that I was obsessed with this year is Daughter of the Pirate King. This is a trilogy following the pirate Alosa and her crew, where she gets captured by an enemy pirate ship whilst looking for a map for her father. It's an enemies to lovers vibe. This book has been so popular and on my list for ages, and I finally read it this year and devoured the whole series in a weekend. So definitely pick it up. These beautiful Barnes & Noble editions are just stunning. I love the little skull and crossbones. I loved them. And finally, the books that I want to read before the end of the year would be to finish my 24 and 24 goals. So of all of these 24 books that I had put on my TBR or my goal in the beginning of the year, I've read 10 of the 24 books. The 14 I have left to read are Daisy Hates, Book 2 in the Magnolia Parks universe, After You by Jojo Moyes. This is the second book following Me Before You, which came out so long ago, and I never finished the series, even though I loved the first book. Nevernight by Jay Kristoff is a fantasy that has been on my list for a very long time. I'm about 40% through this book right now, but this book is tiny font and it's taking me ages to get through. Girl in Pieces has been on my bookshelf forever, and I either need to read it or I need to dump it. It's kind of at that point. If you've read this book, let me know in the comments if you'd recommend. Same thing with Darling Girl by Liz Michalski. This has a really low Goodreads rating, but the blurb sounds really interesting. I love a good Peter Pan retelling. So again, if you've read this, let me know your thoughts, because I'm questioning whether it's worth the read. And then we have First Light. This is the first book in the AD Chronicles, which follow characters in the same time period as Jesus. So it's kind of surrounding all the events that are happening in the years that Jesus is kind of walking on earth and starting his ministry. This series, I have the whole series left to me from my grandma, and I don't know, it sounds interesting, but I at least need to read the first book to decide if it's worth keeping, if it's worth reading, because there's like 18 books in this series. I also want to read It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I'm so excited for the book coming out, so this is also a book that I hope to finish this month so I can read it before the movie. Circe by Madeline Miller. I absolutely loved The Song of Achilles. Like, that book will forever live in my heart. I absolutely loved it. So Circe is another book by the same author, and it's been on my shelf forever. I have this stunning edition of it, and yet I still haven't read it. So I need some motivation, but this is also giving kind of like fall vibes, I feel like. So I've been holding out for fall. Then we have Woven in Moonlight by Isabel Ibanez. I really loved What the River Knows, which was her 2023 release. And this is a book on her backlist, which also has just a stunning cover. And it sounds really interesting. So I've been wanting to read this. I just haven't gotten to it yet. The Poppy War has been on my shelf for so freaking long. It sounds so exciting. I am obsessed with the cover. I loved Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, and I've heard like nothing but amazing things about this trilogy, and yet haven't started it yet. So this one is a must read by the end of the year, because there's no excuses. This has been on my shelf for so long. Another series that I want to start reading is Outlander. Now, I'm obsessed with the TV series, but I have officially stopped watching it because I want to read the books first. I feel like I'm missing out on so much good content. But this is probably the most intimidating read on my TBR. It is 600 pages of the tiniest font ever, and I think the audiobook is like 30 hours. But I'm really excited to read this at some point, and I do think it's going to become a favorite. Then we have This Dark Descent. This was a book that I received in my Owl Crate subscription box, and I told myself that I couldn't continue with a book subscription if I wasn't caught up in reading everything. So I think this was the November selection and I still haven't read it, so therefore I had to put my subscription on pause until I've completed this book. So I think I need to get to this ASAP, just because I know there's going to be a lot of really cool books coming out this fall that I want to use my Owl Crate subscription for. So, personal goals. Next we have The Bell Jar. This is something that has been on my list since high school. A lot of people in high school read this book and my English class did not. And it's been something that I always felt was missing from my completed library. So I want to give this a go. Now, before Lucy Foley wrote thrillers, she wrote historical fiction. And this was the first published book on her list, which is The Last Letter from Istanbul, and I am obsessed with Lucy Foley's writing and I definitely need to read this book. This will be the completion of her backlist, and then I also need to read The Midnight Feast, which just came out this month, but I'm not letting myself read that book until I finished this. So this one is urgent. I need to read it as soon as possible. Alright guys, that was a lot of books to talk about, but I just wanted to say thank you for hanging in there, and if you read any of these books that I hope to read soon, let me know your thoughts in the comments and I'll move them up on my priorities list. I'm really excited for the second half of the year and getting through the rest of my TBR. I'm hoping to get my TBR shelf down to under 200 books. I know that's still an insane number, but you know, moving from the 200s into the 100s seems better. So that is definitely a goal of mine, and I'm just looking forward to another excellent reading semester. Like, fall is when I really thrive. I feel like that's when I really want to read the cozy fantasies and dark academia books and historical fiction. So I think I'm going to knock off a bunch of these in the fall, and I'm really, really excited. So just wanted to say thank you for being here. If you've made it through this video, drop a strawberry down below in the comments and say hi, and let me know which book you are most excited to read in the next coming month. Bye, I'll see you in another video soon.